Hello, everybody. I have 3:29, so let's just give it one more minute and we will get going. Hope you all have had a good day so far. Today, Wednesday, I'm completely lost on what day of the week it is.
Affirmative.
All right, hump day. I never got that whole hump day thing until I saw the commercial that the Cardinals did all those years ago where they had the camel going around and did hump day. It was really funny. Anyway, those of you who never saw it
For year.
don't even know what I'm talking about. All right, it is, I think it's 3:30. I think we have attendees joining, so I think we should get ready and go. Thanks for joining us. As has become our practice for our partner meetings, we've got a couple of speakers lined up for you today. But before that, I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you. And one is sobering, I guess, and that is tied to the last couple of weeks. We worked, many of you worked very hard with our team on a variety of different industry sector working groups to create some protocols for reopening and for operation. Those were shared as drafts with the health community, which tweaked them greatly, and we got them approved, and the city and county, at least of St. Louis, published them and put them on their websites, and all in preparation for reopening of various sectors. The restaurants in both the city and county began that reopening on May 18th, and understanding that they had a lot of new protocols. It was great to see them open, and I hope that you have been able to get out and try to patronize some of them. The last week has been particularly challenging as some of the protests, which were very well intentioned and by a lot of people in this community, some of them, just a few, but some of them got out of control. In particular, really on Monday of last week. And some of those restaurants then received some damage and had to board up or try to operate in an environment where people didn't want to go out or there was a curfew in place. So from that perspective, that's been hard to watch because we know how much the restaurants have struggled since the middle of March, and that setback for them was really challenging. So I do hope that if you haven't gone out yet, you figure out how to do that and help those restaurants who are trying to stay open with the dollars that you can spend with them. The other piece to this is the reason for the protests. You may or may not even realize that we did not send out a statement. I sent a message to our team, our internal team. But it was a very personal message and it was intended for our team. And I saw lots of organizations sending out statements, but I also felt that some of them might be doing it just because they felt like they had to, and I didn't want to be one of those. I felt it was important to communicate to our team, which I did. We just had an all staff meeting this afternoon, and I shared some additional thoughts with them that I would like to say to you as our partners. We need the police. We need to support our police, but we also have to understand that racism exists everywhere. And I would say that there is racism in our local police departments. And I would say that there is racism in every police department. And I would say that there is racism in every organization in this community, including each one of yours and including ours here at Explore St. Louis. Because racism lives within people, and people make up organizations. And so as an organization, we try very hard, and we have for a long, long time, to combat that. We try to work to recruit, to identify and recruit minorities for open positions. We try to find minority businesses that we can purchase from. And I think our team does an admirable job of that, but we can always do better, and we can do a lot better. And we're going to keep trying to do that. And our team, I asked our team for help on that. And I think that it belongs in all of us to try to do that. This community has lots of challenges as it relates to race. And those don't reside just within the police department. Those challenges do reside in all of us, and they reside in the hospitality industry. And some of my colleagues around the country who are CEOs of destination marketing organizations and who also happen to be African American drafted a joint letter that said they've seen it in their careers. And I know they have. And so we all, as an industry, we need to be better. And I hope that you will, just as we are pledging to be better in our industry too. But we need our police, because there's crime and there's always going to be crime. And our police have a really hard job. So we need to help them, and we need to do both. We need to combat racism in every way we can, and we need to help support our police so that they can do the job to keep our communities safe. And that's all I have to say about that. I would like to say that in the course of this this call, you're going to hear from Eric Janicki about where we are in our sales operations, and you're going to hear from Brian about what we're doing to start to reopen our businesses and try to figure out how to market that. So I'm going to let them talk about that. The only thing I really want to say is we do know that it's going to be challenging from the meetings and events perspective for the entire year. But the protocols that helped us get open and will help us operate will be revised as we go through this process. And I've been assured that we will soon get a schedule of capacities from the city in terms of increasing capacities over a series of dates, always with the setup of the 6-foot distancing and all the other practices in line. But that's going to help us all tremendously as we talk with clients for September or October. Not for today, but to be able to tell them today what those numbers can look like and how we can set those rooms. So that is going to be very, very helpful, and I'm really looking forward to that in the very near future, I'm told. And then also, we're very excited about all of the attractions that are getting approval, both in the city and in the county, for reopening. And the aquarium opened on Monday. I understand they did very well for first day. They did even better yesterday. And so that is fantastic. The zoo and the art museum and the science center and the history museum and the river boats and Six Flags and the Magic House and the Butterfly Museum and the Botanical Garden. I mean, all of those have approvals for some date sometime in June. And so within the next couple of weeks here, we are going to have a robust tourism asset again, which we have not had for some time. And the challenge for all of us is going to be how to maximize that so that we can start to see the benefits of tourism from having that. So I'm very excited about that. I'm equally excited that we have a couple of presenters today. The second one you'll hear from will be Renee Simpson, who's a member of our team. She's the Director of Sales here for Levy Restaurants, which operates the food service in America Center. But before we get to Renee, we're going to welcome back Bram Gallagher with CBRE Hotels. Bram presented to us about a month ago, I think, with data that they had collected for March and early April. And he's got an updated report for us that's like hot off the press with updated information, and really looking forward to hearing what that is. So I'm going to say welcome back, Bram. Thank you for joining us again, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Katie. So last time I was here, I think we were at the bottom of the lodging market, and we are now on the upswing. So we've got some good news coming in this presentation. If we could go to the next slide. Here are some important pandemic metrics. So I've just put these into a digest. All four of these, generally speaking, good news. We've got more tests, declining positive rates, certainly declining hospitalization rates, and the death rate has gone down from a peak. So the social distancing measures that were put into place are working. I think the widespread use of masks and other sort of practices right now has been slowing the spread, and has been and is reflected here in some very good metrics. So even as states reopen, we're still seeing pretty good numbers, and this is all very promising signs. We'll go on to the next slide. Here is the disruption curve. Now, what we have been doing to look at and forecast what hotel recovery might look like is to look at the experiences of other countries. And we've gone back and forth a couple times on this. China right here, you can see that in the dark blue. They had some of the most stringent lockdowns and the lowest occupancies, and they've been coming out of that as one of the steepest recoveries as well. Initially, we thought, well, you know, the U.S. has a shallower bottom. The measures are not as strict as in China, so maybe it's going to be slower to recover. But we've actually been following along the Chinese recovery path as far as the speed of occupancy recovery goes, generally speaking. So, and that's been more quickly than in some of the European nations that have sort of continued limitations on travel. And this is some sign of optimism. So moving forward, we're thinking that we're going to be more in line with the Chinese experience as far as the occupancy growth goes out here than the European one. If we go on to the next slide, this is our impact forecast and the shape of the recovery. Where are we now in the relaxing of social distancing phase right here? So really steep declines after the COVID-19 shock. We are moving out of that, and we see that the initial stages of recovery are probably going to be pretty quick, but the one of the difficulties is that complete recovery, we believe, is going to be extended. It's going to take some time for the market to completely return to normal. Probably we're looking more at the sort of 12 to 16 quarters length rather than the a year that we had initially thought, maybe at the beginning of the outbreak. So, but a lot of that recovery, if we look, a lot of that recovery does occur in the first 4 quarters of the relaxing the social distancing phase, which we're certainly in right now, and we can expect then for pretty quick increases to a lot of hotel performance metrics. If we move on to the next slide, what are some other promising, encouraging news bits? So you've heard earlier today, so the Fed Chairman Powell said that we were going to have a dramatic decrease in the unemployment rate by the end of the year. Here's the encouraging jobs report that we've just gotten. If you look, accommodation and food services had the biggest hit to employment. but now they're coming back with the biggest amount of growth. Now, we can break this out into accommodations and food services. We notice that a lot of that growth, not all of it, is in the food services and drinking places. So, so as far as hotels go, it's been a little bit slower. But if we move on to the next slide, hotels are hiring again. Very encouraging sign. Not every position, so the banquet staff is still furloughed at the moment, but some of the auxiliary staff is coming back. This is from Hotel Effectiveness, and they collect a lot of payroll data. If we look here at the Hotel Employment Index throughout the month of May, steady increases, and this is encouraging to us. So, you know, just a while back in the middle of April, probably the height of hotel closures, the lowest occupancy point. We had the most workers either laid off, furloughed, or had reduced hours. And since then, we've been continually increasing those. So signs that the industry is waking up. If we move on to the next slide. And this is reflected not only in hotel operations, but also in travel index. So from Arrivalist and Adara, this is the travel index. You can see circled there. That was a big holiday weekend. A lot of folks were traveling. So this is not only increasing, it looks like it's increasing at an increasing rate. If you look at hotel volume by purpose, so this is going to also be reflected in a lot of the data. We think that the strongest segment that moving forward to the next year and the quickest segment to return is going to be the leisure segment. Right, so and for St. Louis in particular, drive to leisure is going to be the most important. So there's still a lot of hesitancy around air travel. So drive to leisure markets are going to be what we think are going to be the first return. If we move on to the next slide. In the restaurant sector as well, if we look across here, there is some geographic dispersion, but we've seen some signs of life coming back in the restaurant sector, not only in that hiring that you've seen a couple slides back, but people going out, enjoying the restaurant scene, I think is an increasing trend. And it is geographically different, all right? So in the Southeast and the South, we see probably the most return here, and to some extent, some parts of the Midwest as well. And where do we not see the return coming back as much? Well, it's in the Pacific Northwest, New England, and some of the lake areas. We don't see the restaurants coming back as quickly, but with this wonderful spring weather, I guess, and you know, the restlessness that comes with that, and also some of the states opening up earlier than others, we've seen a lot of more restaurant activity in some of these areas in the South and Southeast. If we move on to the next slide. And all of these green shoots point right here to perhaps the most important culmination, increasing hotel occupancy. So this is aggregated, but we do see that bottom occurred in April. We have been seeing, if you look at the dotted dark green, that is the moving average occupancy, steady increases upward. Now, this also illustrates, I think, the depths to which we have sunk, and also the amount of time that it might take to get out of this. But the fact that we're having continuous increases to occupancy, I think, is a really great sign, and one that gives us a lot of optimism for the future. Now, how is this spread out? What are the different types of hotels? What are the divisions here? Not all hotels are performing equally well, but if we go on to the next slide, we can see maybe we split this up. What are some of the segments that are doing the best? What are the metrics that are doing better? Something that we had been looking at very carefully was ADR. So if you notice in this graph here, ADR had been completely flat almost entirely through May, and we were getting very worried that ADR was never going to come back. Not really. We knew ADR was going to come back at some point, but when, right? And it turns out it's been over the previous 2 weeks, we've seen ADR finally start to have some upward momentum. Occupancy started coming back in April, and now by the end of May, we've seen ADR return. Occupancy, this is something to pay attention to. Occupancy sank more quickly and deeper than ADR. It also recovered more quickly. One of the reasons that we think that is that there's that limited discount effect. So you can't convince people to show up to your hotel if your hotel is closed, if social distancing says that they can't go, or if they're afraid that they might be infected with COVID. So there's no point in lowering rates. That, I think it helped the rates not dip as low as occupancy, but good news, the last 2 weeks, we've seen rates start to increase as well. We hope the revenue managers will be a little more aggressive on rate this time around than they had in the great financial crisis, and I think there's a lot of reason to believe that they can be, and especially if that employment comes back as expected. We go on to the next slide. Let's divide this up, not by the metrics, but maybe by some of the geographies. And I talked about that drive to leisure, and maybe what are the factors that might stimulate travel in some areas, but not others. Well, certainly the intensity of the infection, but also the types of markets there are. Some of the markets we've seen some most dramatic recoveries in. Tampa is listed as one of these. It's that drive to leisure market, one that is accessible. Also Norfolk, Virginia Beach. There's also beaches in Florida, South Carolina, so Jacksonville is doing pretty well. And so if you've got an attractive a place to go for the drive to leisure market, then you can broadcast this out and you can advertise this and make this known. I think this is a very strong selling point right now. People are looking for a place that they'll feel safe and that they can go to and enjoy themselves. They're looking at a more limited menu of choices than they were before. We look over here on the left, who's not doing so well? Oahu. So Oahu, not a drive-to market, certainly. They've been doing poorly last time we met, and we believe they're going to continue to do poorly into the immediate future because that reliance on air travel and international travel. So again, appealing to the domestic drive-to leisure traveler is going to be very important. Some of those other markets that aren't doing so well, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago, areas of high density and a lot of outbreak as well. So and publicized outbreaks. So if we move on to the next slide. The worst market, though, so this, if anyone was curious, the worst market is Las Vegas. Now, Las Vegas, I just wanted to slip this in here because these numbers are so shocking. If you were worried about your market doing poorly, at least you're not Las Vegas. If you look at the Strip RevPAR in April of 2019, it was $130, $131 almost per available room. In April of 2020, 57 cents. So essentially, Las Vegas was completely empty in April. I don't know if you've seen some of the photos lately, but people are going back to Las Vegas. They feel more confident. It looks like Las Vegas has been able to attract people with the idea that they have established some kind of safety, some kind of hygiene there, and it is a good domestic location to go to, and we've seen dramatic improvements. So Las Vegas had a very rough April, but it's making forecasting easy. We'll forecast it to increase from 57 cents, their Strip RevPAR. Well, moving on to the next slide. So that's what close look like. And if there's confirmation that we've hit a bottom, it was in Las Vegas. Some of the other things that we've noticed, the occupancy drop was greater for the higher ADR, but for the luxury segment, this has just recently changed. And I think this is because if you're going to take the risk to go out and enjoy a leisure trip, then the luxury hotels do have something extra to offer. And that's where we've seen the luxury bump is again in that leisure market. So the upper upscale and luxury had been tied. Luxury has seen a little bit more of a bump. If we move on to the next slide, this is even more pronounced if we were going to look at the location type. Resort areas are going to be the best performing locations pretty soon. They had been the worst. They had fallen very hard. And if you recall, last time we met, that they were performing the worst of all the locations. The dramatic turnaround again is through those drive-to markets that don't depend on international travel. So giving people a reason and a sense of safety going to these locations has been essential, and it has really driven up the resort location performance very quickly, and we do predict it's going to be the best performing segment soon. It won't necessarily outperform all of these segments forever, but again, the leisure traveler we think is coming back first, and it's something that we can focus on in the short term. If we go to the next slide, this is again just to show the amazing increase in resort ADR, as well as the fact that ADR change, and we're just so excited. We're over the moon about ADRs increasing. As you can probably tell, it's happened not only in some chain scales and locations, but it seems to be a universal trend among all the chain scales and locations. So very good news. And again, that resort performance is really attractive right now. We move on to the next slide. Again, I would be remiss if I didn't offer up our baseline forecast. We've just come out with this as our revised forecast for the baseline. For 2020, we're about 38% down for occupancy for the year. ADR is down 22.5. It's important to note that the ADR and the occupancies here are not going to be falling evenly on every hotel. So it's not to say that every hotel is going to have a 22.5% decline in ADR. It's the mix of hotels that people are staying at that will create some of that dip. So people are early on in this had been shifting away from the high-priced hotels very quickly, so those dropped off the quickest. We think that those are going to return though in 2021. So it's also to point out that 8.9% increase in ADR isn't going to apply universally to every hotel, but rather it's going to reflect the return of those higher priced chain scales as people go to those locations again. We only achieved full recovery in RevPAR about 2023. So this is going to be an extended recovery. If you move on to the next slide, there are two different scenarios that right now we think are about equally likely because of the uncertainty. We've revised these a few times, but this is the shape of the recovery, that sort of J curve, as Jamie calls it. He's my boss. He calls it the Nike swoosh recovery. I'm sure you've heard of that one before. But
that's trademark protected, though.
It is. I like the J curve better because it is, or you could even do the square root kind of recovery here. But it's a very sharp downturn followed by a relatively quick or front-loaded recovery, but one that does extend out for a period of time. 16 quarters in the baseline, 21 in the downside. Most of the time, the usual circumstances, we say that baseline is the most likely by a long shot. But in this particular case, because of the uncertainty, it's kind of a toss-up right now between the baseline and the downside. So each one has got a lot of evidence one way or the other, but still maybe if I had to assign percentages, 41% on baseline, 39% on the downside. If we move on to the next slide, so that is our, say, our different scenarios. How are the markets doing? So this is in 2020, and I think we've seen this before. We've updated these with the newest forecast that we've got. St. Louis is actually one of the better performers on this, a little bit to the right of the median. Some of the worst performers are New York and Boston, DC, where we've had significant and well-publicized outbreaks. Some of the best performers, which is to say they had the smallest declines, again, those drive-to leisure markets, and also seasonality has something to do with this. So if that's something that you can capitalize on, Tucson and Phoenix don't have a lot of visitors in the middle of summer. It's too hot. So right now, the fact that people aren't visiting there is not unusual. On the other hand, when autumn comes, if the outbreak hasn't had a resurgence, we think that they'll be able to capitalize on that autumn travel season, and that's going to help out their 2020 year-over-year RevPAR change. But again, some of these have to do with the intensity of the outbreaks, the speed at which some of these states have reopened, the seasonality has got something to do with it. The mix of different types of hotels are going to be determining this RevPAR change. And if we move on to the last slide, what about into 2023? This is by the time that the U.S. as a whole has recovered. So St. Louis will have done better than fully recovered. So if you were wondering, is St. Louis going to act like the national average? It actually will be faster than the national average. And some of the reasons why, again, you've got the accessibility for that drive to leisure. You don't have an incredible density right now or a well-publicized outbreak, among other factors. You know, there's just a growth potential in St. Louis we think is also a very big positive in its favor. Some of the ones that are going to struggle, again, Oahu is not in the same position. Also, some of the oil patch markets, Houston, for instance, down there is going to have a tough time because of a lot of factors, and oil prices are in there as well. So Houston, as well as Fort Worth. Again, some of these markets in the Southeast and those, again, drive to leisure markets are going to do much better. Now, if we move on to the next couple of slides here, this might be a little bit more of a bottom line analysis rather than the top line analysis for the operators. We know RevPAR declines are going to cause even bigger declines in profits. In this current now it is a recession. Current recession certainly reflects that. These are the last two. This is 2009 and 2001. So we actually have a large database of profit and loss statements from these two recessions. And this is what we found is that decreases in the RevPAR are going to cause disproportionately large decreases in profit, and that has increased over time, that sort of multiplier effect. If we go back even further, so this trends database, next slide, please. This trends database goes way back to the 30s. It looks like that the RevPAR recovery has lengthened in the amount of time. So cycles have sort of stretched out just in general. That's an economic trend. And whereas before, RevPAR recovery from recessions took perhaps between 2-3 years, 4 years. The last two took quite a bit longer, 6 years and 5 years. On the other hand, some good news, if we look to the next slide, is that in the modern age, hotels have become more agile. And this is going to be important, I think, as we recover how a hotel will respond to the crisis. Move to the next slide. Managing costs, changing the mix of services. What we see here is that whereas before in previous recessions, profits took 2 to 3 times as long as RevPAR to recover, in 2001 and 2009 recessions, we had approximate parity. So by the time RevPAR had recovered, profit too had also recovered. And we think this is, again, because that hotels have become somewhat more nimble in how they manage costs and the service that they can provide, the service level. So if we move on to the next slide, this is a sort of a suggestion we have. What will the hotel look like in times of COVID? How can we capture some of that food and beverage revenue? Here's just an image of a very high class room service. So this is the social distance romantic evening out, or the romantic evening in. We might see, just the changing face of hospitality that allows for social distancing, but still allows service to the guests at a very high level. This last slide, I don't want to leave you with an ominous note, but this last slide is, we think, very fascinating. we've been looking at short-term rental and traditional hotel search terms on the Google Trends. And this is a source of high frequency data. Something we've noticed that over time and through March, April, May, we had a big drop. So no one by late March, no one was really searching for their next vacation as we locked down. But over time, searches for Airbnb, for VRBO have increased steadily until they're about where they were, the same places where they were last year. On the other hand, searches for more traditional hotels, Hilton, Marriott, and Expedia, have remained at that low level. So what effect that has, the shift towards maybe alternative rental, or at least attitudes towards those, or maybe the customer base just looks different for these two segments, remains to be seen, but we're going to be taking a very close look at that. That's the market overview as a whole. And thanks for letting me share that, and thanks for letting me speak with Explore St. Louis.
Thank you, Bram. That was absolutely terrific. And just a reminder to everybody, Barry is going to be providing you with a leave behind via email after today's call. So a lot of that data may have been a little bit hard to interpret on the screen. So you're going to be able to have a chance to study it and print it out when we get it out to you. Bram, if you don't mind hanging on for a couple of minutes here, I'm going to invite anyone that has any questions to go ahead and use the question function on GoToWebinar if you want to pose a question, and I'd be happy to read them off to Bram. Seeing none, and I'll give it another couple of seconds here. We're going to go ahead and advance the slides so that we can get into Renee's presentation, so that she can fill us in reference to the protocols that Levy Restaurants, our caterer here at America Center, is going to be embracing, that very much, I'm sure, are consistent with the protocols that we put into place for St. Louis City as well as St. Louis County.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kitty, Brian, and Eric, for having me on the Explore St. Louis partnership call today. And I'm delighted to join all of you in the St. Louis area hospitality industries. As Brian mentioned, my name is Renee Simpson. I'm the Director of Catering Sales with Levy at the America Center and Dome. And I joined the team here in the spring of 2018. To catch you up very quickly on Levy, we are the location caterer servicing the Dome and the Convention Center, but also the Enterprise Center, home of the Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues, and then also Stiefel Theater here in St. Louis. Next slide, please. So today I'll be reviewing Levy's strategy in response to food and beverage services in a post-pandemic environment. We have focused on 6 key areas: health and safety, concessions, restaurants and cafe operations, premium operations, technology strategy, people, and communications. It's important that I mention that all initiatives that are reviewed today are subject to change based on evolving CDC and local health department decisions. And the strategies applied to these key 6 areas can be expanded or retracted based on those guidelines. If we can go ahead and just jump forward to slide 4, I'll start to review health and safety. We've looked at arranging this into 4 subcategories: PPE, or personal protective equipment, sanitation, signage, and operations. Next slide, please. I'll start with PPE, as this is becoming increasingly familiar to all of us, and the Levy team is no exception here, with gloves and masks being provided to our team members during each shift. That's team members that are prepping the food, and then team members that are also serving the food. Possible partition guards, where necessary and available based on venue locations, will also be deployed. For sanitation, we all know that hand washing every 20 minutes and singing happy birthday while we do it should equal a clean set of hands. In addition to that, we're also going to increase our presence of sanitizer stations and utilize portable sinks as required per function and health guidelines. Our team, in conjunction with the venue's cleaning services team, will ensure all areas in both front and back of the houses are thoroughly sanitized. For signage, this is really going to help us to encourage social distancing. Think of rope and stanchions and signs and easels that can direct foot traffic to help us apply safety precautions. So as a guest were to approach a menu station in a reception per se, gone are the days of multiple people approaching at once and servicing themselves. Think more of rope and stanchion and signage, providing them with one way in, they receive the menu item from the team member, and then they have one way out. When we think of operations, it's not just limited to our culinarians and also our banquet attendants, but we think of receiving. And we also want to think of how our operations meet as a team. Our purchasing department receives all product. They too will be supplied with personal protective equipment per shift. And as we ask our team members to meet for pre-shift or per stand-up, we're thinking about the frequency of those meetings and the number of people that actually attend those meetings at once. And if we can move on to the next slide, I will go ahead and review concessions. So upon reviewing our concessions, restaurants, and cafe operations, Levy divided this into 4 categories of serviceware and utensils, condiments, beverages, and menu engineering. If we could move to the next slide, please. So for our serviceware and utensils, really in any area that we can use single-use food service items for consumption, that's what we're moving towards. This is cutlery, this is straws that are wrapped individually, this is paper cups with lids and paper napkins. For condiments, we're looking at using PC or personal consumption condiments. These can be supplied in several different ways. They can be supplied at the time of transaction when you actually go to get your hot dog from the concession stand. We can have a condiment station set up for our team member to be handing out the PC condiments with protective equipment on, or if a pump must be used, like a traditional ketchup pump after you get your hot dog, we'll have an attendant there that will pump the ketchup for you and put it into a souffle cup. Beverage services, we're moving towards all individually bottled items, but if a fountain must be used, we'll have an attendant there to fill a one-time or single-use paper cup with a lid to ensure safety. For menu engineering, with any menu item possible, if we can move it into a covered state, such as creating it to be boxed or wrapped or hinged in a clamshell, we're going to do that. For our hawkers that service guests in our seats at our sporting venues, we're looking at doing individually packaged snacks, and then of course serving sealed cold beers. And if we can move to the next slide, I'll then review our premium operations. So for our premium operations, Levy also refers to this as our banquets department. And Levy has divided this into 4 subcategories similar to our concessions, which would be serviceware and utensils, condiments, beverages, and menu engineering. And when we think of our banquets department, we envision our locations with beautiful ballrooms and all of the amenities that are associated with social events. And right now we're going to service those events with disposable items as much as possible. So disposable plates, single wrapped cutlery, single wrapped straws, single use cups with lids. We are moving away from linen napkins, reusable china, and reusable stainless steel. All of our display furniture that we use to display our beautiful menu items will be spaced appropriately. And our beverage station, such as a coffee break, might look a lot different to our guests. Think of a Levy attendant being there to pour that individual cup of coffee, provide the lid, and then provide that individual PC item. When we think of menu engineering, we also are looking at our entire catering menu evolving. We are coming up with new and inventive ways to modify our buffet services, and we'll continue to share those out with our clients and all of our partners as it's ever changing. If we can move on to the next slide, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our technology strategy.
Slide, Mark. Thanks.
So for our Levy's tech strategy, this is going to cover transactional, automated, operation, and people tech. In this particular focus area, our strategy and capabilities will vary based on location. And if we can jump to the next slide, I'll go ahead and cover just a few of those. For transactional, this is going to be probably what we're most familiar with nowadays, what we've been using for curbside pickup and all of our shopping orders that we're picking up curbside. And that's basically cash-free, contactless, or frictionless checkout with a mobile pickup if possible. And we're deploying that at our venues wherever available. Automated tech is a really cool concept. It's when we apply robotics to not only prep the food, but perhaps pour your beer and maybe even deliver your order to you in your seat. Operational, we can apply tech to areas such as our month-end inventory, when we can look to minimize labor hours that are needed for counting. And we can also increase our accuracy here in our financial reporting. And for people, we can assist with the safety of our team members, of course, through temperature tracking, and offer virtual training whenever possible to reduce the number of guests inside of one training room at a time. And if we go ahead and move into the next slide, we will take a look at our strategy applied to personnel. So here we really concentrated on commonly accessed spaces that our team members utilize to complete the daily tasks required in their roles, and also those leisure spaces that are provided for family meals and breaks. Those include, but they're not limited to, our in-venue office spaces, entry points, education and training, and break rooms. Next slide, please. In our office spaces, we'll be following social distancing guidelines, minimizing the use of high-touch equipment whenever possible, but we'll also be making sanitizer readily available when we must use those items, such as the copy machine. Temperature, when our employees are entering the building, we will be taking all team members' temperatures and asking a series of short health-related questions. Our employees will have to initial that questionnaire, and we'll be logging those per shift and keeping them confidential. When we look at training, internal training is required by Levy in order to ensure compliance. We'll be logging that per employee. And then when we think of our external training, I refer to it as an active and collaborative dialogue with all of our business partners. That's always an ongoing conversation in which we share customized solutions for their needs and our best practices that we learn from our fellow colleagues. And then when we think of food, these are our break rooms, our employee cafeterias, and our cafes. We're looking to serve box lunches or single service meals with one employee wearing protective equipment, and then perhaps even creating several smaller break areas inside of our venues to reduce the number of people that meet in the same spot and give our employees some more space. On the next slide, we will review communications. So our communication strategy focuses on our staff and team members, our guests, our business partners, and the media. And if we move to the next slide, actually you're on the correct slide here, Mark, on our focus areas. For our staff, our HR team is currently drafting a playbook to engage returning and new employees with a warm Levy welcome. And we have to prepare them as well for a new way of working. And this playbook that our HR team is working diligently on helps us to create business continuity among all of our venues, and also helps us to assess and accommodate and properly schedule all team members that can attend virtually and or need to participate in the facility. For our guests, one of our top communication goals is to have a dialogue with our venue guests, and we can do that collaboratively with all of our business partners. Together, we can accomplish letting our conventioneers, our exhibitors, and our fans, and everyone that visits our downtown St. Louis venues and the surrounding area venues we want to let them know that they're in a safe place. We can do this with signage on site, by extending hospitality to everyone at a respectable distance, by supplying email correspondence before the events that they attend, and then also perhaps through our business partners' websites or social media platforms. Certainly for Levy's business partners, we know that one size does not fit all. So we look to provide customized plans as needed based on the venue infrastructure, the type of event, concert, game, convention, and as always, collaboratively following local health regulations and based on partner preferences, of course. For media, our strategy here is to have a unified, supported message for all inquiries with both proactive and reactive responses that are pre-approved by our business partners at each location before going public or going to press. Just one last slide here, Mark, if you would, please. That concludes my review of our 6 key focus areas. I just wanted to mention a quick thank you once again to Kitty, to Brian, and to Eric for having me on the partnership call today. And to all of you, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. It was my pleasure.
Great. Thanks so much, Renee. Really appreciate your sharing that with us. Because I think, you know, we've got a lot of folks on the call who are operating some aspect of what you're doing as well, and hopefully this will help them as they develop their plans for operating, because you covered so many bases. It reminded me that what I didn't say, I don't think I said so clearly, is that the mayor and the county executive are expecting large venues to submit plans in advance of being able to operate. And those plans need to include the health protocols, but they also, a lot of those things, particularly as it relates to food, are going to have to incorporate a lot of the things that you've just covered, Renee. So I think it was a really good reminder and refresher for me as well, that when you want to reopen and you have a big event, that as you develop your plan, you need to be thinking through all of those things. We want everybody to reopen. So thanks again.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
I also wanted to say, Dr. Gallagher is still on the line. And when he went off, I asked him a question, and he's responded to me by email. So I've been looking up and down at my phone, but he did say that he is still on. And this is the question I asked him, and I'd like him to respond to it. I asked him if, when he showed the occupancy data, when he was showing the chart and the occupancy data, and it showed increases beginning, whether that included hotels that had shuttered or not. And Dr. Gallagher, could you respond about that?
Oh, sure thing. And thanks, Renee. That was a great presentation. So the figures that I had put on earlier, what we've been doing is keeping any temporarily closed hotels in the denominator so we can make more direct comparisons. We've got a few hotels that we know are permanently closed, and those have been removed from the supply in the calculations, but hotels that have just been temporarily closed or may have closed because of COVID specifically, those are still in our occupancy ADR calculations.
And that's terrific. That's really helpful for me, and I think maybe for some of the others as well, because I looked at those occupancy increases and I wondered if the increases were going up because the supply had dwindled, and that's not the case. So that's really good news.
That is good news.
And it obviously also then affects the average daily rate as well. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Kitty,
Right,
with Dr. Gallagher still on the phone, Tim Cooper from Union Station had a quick question, and that is that how long do you forecast that it's going to take to reach full employment of the hospitality industry once again? Because we had basically achieved full employment where everyone that wanted a job in hospitality was employed. Do you have any forecast in reference to the recovery of employment?
Yes, that's a great question as well. And this has a lot to do with our employment forecast have a lot to do with this different scenarios that we've got playing out, whether or not the economic fallout persists, or if it can be more quickly remedied. And right now, the preponderance of evidence we believe is it's going to be a quicker recovery than, say, the great financial crisis. There aren't the same structural issues like asset bubbles or enormous credit imbalances that we did see back in, say, 2007 through 9. And I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, and there's a lot of eagerness on the part of the consumer to try to get out there. And that demand stimulus is going to help employment. The baseline, we think, it's going to take us back to what we consider full employment in about 12 quarters. And again, a lot of that is front-loaded, so the recovery will be a little bit faster in the beginning parts of it. But that downside and severe downside scenarios could extend that measurably. We even have one severe downside that's used for, say, stress testing for banks and financial institutions. And that severe downside contemplates the full employment, or certainly 2019 levels of unemployment are not reached in the forecast horizon. So there is a lot of uncertainty right now. We believe, though, that between 12 quarters to, say, on the more of the difficult side, maybe 16 to 20 quarters.
Great.
Well,
Thank you so much. There are no other questions right now, but if anyone, in the interest of time, if you have any questions, we're going to log them in the question function on GoToMeeting, and we'll have either Renee or Dr. Gallagher get back to you with a response. And Renee and Dr. Gallagher, I'm hoping you don't mind if we reach back out to you, because your information has been invaluable.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Mr. Janicki, do you want to give us a quick update in reference to what's happening in the wonderful world of sales?
Well, I'm hoping it's wonderful. So, but that slide before, Kitty, it was all vegetarian platter. It looked very good. So Renee did it especially for you. So I do want to thank Renee, and you saw last week we had Patrick from Connect present. We plan on having in one of the future meetings having PSAD present what virtual meetings will look like going forward. So we have internally we have a preliminary presentation from them coming this next week, and then we're going to break it down to be a little smaller presentation for everybody on this call. But I think that will probably be one of the most interesting ones, because we're all really interested to see what will meetings look like going forward. Will it be hybrid, virtual? Will they be totally virtual? And what I understand for a lot of people, it will transition from being a high percentage of virtual to less as protocols open up. But also, Renee, we're going to have Brian's team take a lot of your data and put it on our site so our customers can see it as well, so people know what's going on. But just we've been tracking the COVID-related cancels primarily for the building-related, the America Center-related, and right now we're trending at 113,000 room nights canceled since initial COVID, which relates into 77 million in economic impact. And that's a huge amount. Now, this past week we had close to 19,000 room nights and new leads for the building, but our tentatives, and we go fiscal year from July 1 to June 30th. So we look at from July 1 to June 30th next year, we have 79,000, almost 80,000 room nights in new tentatives. Now, many of those are rebooks or reschedules of that 113,000 have canceled. So everything's a moving figure for us, because every day something's changing. I know we're frustrating Kitty because one day we say, hey, we've got this, and then we move it to a new set of dates. But it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. And I shout out to my team for the great job they're doing of communicating with customers and also working out the different contractual things. But I just wanted to give a little overview. TAP, we're waiting for the TAP data. Shame on me. We didn't submit our data correctly this past month, so we did it today. So we should be getting the TAP, the peer set data probably in the next couple days, and hopefully next week I can present the findings of, and it will really be telling because it will be April's data telling us how much this has impacted us versus as to pace as to our peer set as well. So that is forthcoming. So that's it, Brian. Back to you, my friend.
All right, well, I'm going to bring this home in about 3 minutes. You ready? So I told you last time about our new leisure marketing campaign, and did I hear Dr. Gallagher say that it's all about leisure marketing right now? Yes. So we postponed the campaign. We were going to introduce it this week, but we thought better of it given the timing and conditions on the ground. So we've kind of had a soft launch this week. We're starting to talk about it from a PR standpoint. We had a nice hit last night on KMOV. We sent a press release out. Kitty and I are going to be doing interviews throughout the region, talking about re-exploring St. Louis and the wealth of attractions and experiences that people can enjoy. And then, of course, we're going to direct traffic into our new passports page as we talk about this campaign. So next slide, Mark. We are going to begin a series of display digital ads across a wide spectrum of opportunities throughout the community. Hopefully you'll be seeing these in places like STL Today. You'll be seeing them in CNN online, a lot of different news sources throughout the community. You're going to see them on the marquee at America Center. You're going to see them across the street over at the Lumiere Place in front of the Four Seasons on the big screen. You're going to see them at the airport if you venture out to the airport. And we're really pleased with the way this campaign has come together. Next slide, Marcus. I shared with you the photo shoot that Jen Holenkamp and company just went out. These haven't been, you're not looking at the color corrected shots. We want from you, I want to remind all of you that as we have attractions reopening from throughout the community, team up with us to take pictures of customers enjoying an experience at your attractions with a face covering on in our new normal. We'd love to feature your attraction within the context of our digital marketing campaign. And if you use the hashtag Explore St. Louis, we'll be able to pick it up via CrowdRiff, or if you reach out to me or Jen Holenkamp, we can arrange an opportunity to actually come out and stage a photo shoot. Next slide. I mentioned to you Passport to St. Louis. If anyone has not loaded their special offer or opening details into Passport, please let us know. We're standing by. We can make updates to this content on the fly and very quickly. Now, here's the exciting part. We're adding a new social media component to this campaign to generate some excitement and enthusiasm throughout the community. And if you advance the slide, Mark, you'll see on your screen the fact that we have this handy dandy sign that we're going to be printing window appliques of so that you can cling them onto your window as a testament that in fact your business is open as we re-explore St. Louis. And that we also invite you, and we're going to be distributing this beginning tomorrow with instructions, we also invite you to stand in front of your business enterprise with your sign. And if you advance to the next slide, you'll see a couple of models. They are Renee Eichelberger, head of our leisure travel sales, and Jen Holenkamp, that we are indeed, we're open. Yes, we're open. Re-explore St. Louis. So we are going to hit the road beginning Monday. We're going to blitz the entire community old school. There's going to be old fashioned, sales blitz throughout the community. We're going to load up the Partridge Family van with a bunch of these decals and traditional signs with instructions on them as to how you can take a picture and post these socially. We're going to come out to you. So we're going to distribute these to you beginning on Monday, and we look forward to creating a bit of a social media movement. We want everyone standing in front of their business enterprise with a sign expressing their enthusiasm for being open for business once again in St. Louis. So more to come on all of that. If you have any ideas or you want to share with us any feedback, email me at bhall@explorestlouis.com. And we'd be delighted to collaborate with you on ways that that we can help further this message. But look for us on Monday, and we're going to try to hit as many businesses in the community that are consumer facing as we can to drop off your supply. With that, Madam President, I'm done. Oh, shoot, I had one more slide.
I knew you didn't make it 3 minutes.
Okay, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Don't forget, on KSDK, Channel 5, the week of June 22nd, we're going to have a whole week of tourism programming. We're going to be live on location at a variety of different attractions throughout the community. We're going to be talking to leaders in travel and tourism, including Kitty Radcliffe and Bob O'Laughlin and Sherry Sissick and Beth Fitzgerald and a host of others. If you haven't gotten on board to take advantage of this opportunity, please do. Because right now it's time that we connect with St. Louisans and remind them that it's time to support the home team. We need them to plan a vacation, a tourism experience right here in St. Louis. Never been a better time to do it. Done.
All right. So closing comment. I don't have a date for you yet in September, but because we're working through the calendar for our annual meeting. But our marketing committee is reconvening next week to redo the marketing plan, which the great marketing committee worked on in February and in early March. And that marketing plan obviously has to be put on a shelf for use at a later time. But we are going to actually have our marketing committee meeting as an in-person meeting next week. Now, we'll still provide a number for people who aren't comfortable coming to an in-person meeting, but we also intend to start doing as many in-person meetings as we can, properly set up, properly scheduled for social distancing, and putting all the right protocols in place so that we can begin to model what we want our customers to be able to do. And if we're not willing to do it, how can we expect our customers to do it? So we will figure out how to do our annual meeting complete with Hospitality Heroes as an in-person meeting in September. I can tell you that it will not be in the Farrar Theater because we're going to need a whole lot more space than that. But hey, we have big empty exhibit halls right now and a dome. So I think we can figure this out, and we're going to. And I would encourage all of you to try to figure out how to have in-person meetings responsibly, being very sensitive to the fact that for the next 6 months, maybe 8 months, who knows how long, the virus is certainly going to be among us, and that we don't want to jeopardize the attendees' health for those meetings, whether that's our staff or whether that's our partners. But we also have to be able to model what we want our customers to do and tell them that it's safe for them to do. So if you have any thoughts, please share that with me. But I hope that you will consider doing that yourselves. So look forward to more from us as soon as we have a date. Thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. We've gone way too long, longer than we said we were going to. So we're going to adjourn the call now. If you have any additional thoughts, please feel free to email them to us, and we'll respond offline. Thanks so much. Have a great day.